Now, the president of Turkmenistan has ordered his officials to find a way to put out a fire that's been burning for decades in a huge desert crater nicknamed the Gateway to Hell.
Imagine a fiery pit in the heart of the desert, burning relentlessly for over 50 years. So crazy, right? This pit is so intense that locals dubbed it the Gates of Hell. But now, something shocking is happening. The flames that once devoured the night sky over Turkmenistan are starting to die out. Scientists on the ground say this isn't just a natural burnout, it's a turning point. Because what lies beneath the Darvaza gas crater might be even more dangerous than the fire itself. From toxic emissions to collapsing ground structures, experts fear that what happens after the blaze may be far worse. If this fire is going out, could it be a blessing or the start of a new environmental nightmare? But first, how did a Soviet drilling accident create one of the world's most haunting natural wonders? And why has it burned for more than half a century? Birth of the Gates of Hell. To understand the story behind this surreal, fire-spewing pit in the desert, you have to picture a vast stretch of emptiness in Central Asia. That's the Karakum Desert, one of the driest and most remote places on Earth. It's the early 1970s, and Turkmenistan is still part of the Soviet Union. This endless landscape of sand and salt flats wasn't seen as a dead zone back then. Rather, it was a potential gold mine, not of precious metals, but of fossil fuels. The Soviets believed the land was sitting on enormous reserves of oil and gas, and they were determined to tap into them. So, in the year 1971, Soviet engineers set up a drilling site not far from the village of Darvaza. Everything seemed routine at first. They sank their rigs into the ground and began pushing into what they thought was solid earth. But a few hundred feet down, they hit a pocket of trouble. Literally. Without warning, the ground gave way beneath them. What had been a drilling site suddenly collapsed into a yawning crater, swallowing equipment and tearing open a hidden underground cavern filled with natural gas. No one was killed, but the crater left behind was massive, over 200 feet wide and nearly 70 feet deep. And more importantly, it wasn't just empty space. It leaked methane, a highly flammable greenhouse gas that can suffocate animals and humans. The engineers, faced with a problem that hadn't exactly been covered in any textbook, made a snap decision. They decided to light it on fire. The logic was simple. Better to burn off the methane in a controlled blaze than let it seep invisibly into the air or, worse, drift into nearby villages. They assumed the gas pocket was limited, a few days of fire, maybe a week or two, and the problem would burn itself out. At least, that's what they thought. But that's not what happened. Instead of a temporary flare-up, the pit became a permanent inferno. Days turned to weeks, then to months, and eventually to years. The crater, which locals soon nicknamed the Gates of Hell, never stopped burning. Even today, 53 years later, flames still shoot from its edges and dance across the surface like something alive. And here's the strange part. There are no official Soviet records of the exact event. According to the BBC Real documentary, not only did the engineers misjudge the scale of the gas reserve, but it's possible the entire thing was brushed under the rug. Some experts still debate whether it even happened in 1971. The secrecy, combined with the crater's apocalyptic appearance, only added to its mystique. Over time, the fire became more than just an engineering mishap. It turned into a national curiosity and eventually a bizarre tourist attraction. People traveled thousands of miles just to stand at the rim and feel the heat blast their faces. By night, it looked like a scene from a sci-fi movie. The earth cracked open, glowing from within, spewing flame into a starless sky. But let's not forget, this wasn't meant to be here. The Gates of Hell weren't designed, they weren't studied, and they definitely weren't safe. This was a monument to a miscalculation, an accident so persistent that nature itself couldn't seem to undo it. And yet, it's been allowed to burn for over 5 decades. So, ask yourself this: have you ever heard of a fire burning this long? from a hole no one planned, started by people who expected it to vanish in a week. Because that's exactly what we're dealing with here, a fire born from hubris, kept alive by geology, and now, after all these years, finally starting to dim. And that leads us to the real question. What exactly has kept this fire alive for so long? The science behind the eternal flame. To understand why the gates of hell have been burning for over 53 years and why scientists are suddenly worried about their decline, we have to go underground. Because beneath the scorched surface of the Karakum Desert lies something far more complex than just an open flame. This isn't a bonfire gone rogue. It's a chemical reaction fueled by the earth itself. The fire burns on methane, a colorless, odorless gas naturally produced when organic material breaks down without oxygen, kind of like nature's pressure cooker, sealed away for centuries. Turkmenistan is sitting on one of the largest natural gas reserves in the world, and the Darvaza crater happens to be a puncture wound in that system. Imagine jabbing a hole in a shaken soda can and watching the spray erupt endlessly. That's essentially what the Soviets did in 1971 when they drilled into the wrong pocket. Now, here's where the science kicks in. The crater didn't just ignite once and smolder quietly. The fire keeps going because methane continues to seep in from deep underground. The Earth's crust in this area is fractured and layered like a stack of Swiss cheese. It is usually characterized as porous, leaky, and constantly shifting. Gas from these deep reservoirs flows through these fractures, feeding the flames from below like an invisible hand topping off a lantern. But nothing lasts forever, right? According to research covered in Popular Mechanics and detailed in the Geologic Door to Hell documentary, geologists now believe nearby gas extraction efforts may be draining the underground pressure that once sustained the fire. The crater itself spans over 200 feet across and sits almost 70 feet deep. At first glance, it looks endless, but in geological terms, it's just a shallow dent. What keeps it lit isn't the size, but the supply chain beneath it, and that chain is finally weakening. Here's the twist though. This change isn't entirely natural. Over the years, Turkmenistan has increased drilling in nearby areas, tapping into some of the same gas networks. These new wells could be siphoning off methane that would have otherwise leaked into the crater. It's like putting more straws into the same milkshake. The fire at Darvaza now has to share its fuel, resulting in a flickering flame that no longer burns with the same fury. From a scientific standpoint, this is both good news and bad. On the one hand, less methane reaching the surface means less pollution. Methane is one of the most dangerous greenhouse gases, over 80 times more effective at trapping heat in the atmosphere than carbon dioxide in the short term. A fire burning that much methane for over 5 decades has likely done serious damage to the surrounding environment and global climate patterns. But here's where it gets complicated. See, methane is dangerous whether it burns or not. When ignited, it turns into carbon dioxide, which, while still harmful, is less potent. But if the gas stops burning and starts leaking again, it could seep out silently, undetected, and be far more destructive. This is what scientists are afraid of. If the fire dies out before the gas supply is truly exhausted, we may not be closing the gates of hell. Instead, we might be throwing open a new kind of trapdoor. And then there's the physical risk. If pressure builds up in closed-off pockets, the ground around the crater could destabilize, causing new collapses or even explosions. Geologists worry that sealing the site too soon, without fully understanding the underground network, could trigger unintended consequences. So ask yourself, what happens if the methane fuel suddenly runs out, but the system underneath keeps shifting? Could the end of the fire be the start of something worse? The crater may be shrinking, but the questions it raises are only growing. As the gas supply dwindles, Turkmenistan is rushing to close the crater. But what risks does this pose? The race to close the gates. It's 2025, and something strange is happening in the middle of the Karakum Desert. The gates of hell, that legendary fire pit blazing at the center of Turkmenistan, is finally dimming. For over 5 decades, this gaping crater has glowed like a wound in the earth. Tourists traveled for hours just to see the flames, and locals accepted its constant burn-like background noise. But now, for the first time since the early 1970s, the fire is starting to shrink, and that's exactly what makes scientists nervous. In a press statement earlier this year, Turkmenistan's government acknowledged what many had already noticed. The Darvaza crater wasn't burning like it used to. The flames are lower, the heat less intense, and smoke now hangs thicker than fire over the hole. And behind the scenes, something much bigger is underway. According to Popular Mechanics and Unilad, state-owned gas company Turkmengaz has begun drilling new wells near the crater in hopes of siphoning off the remaining methane before it even reaches the surface. The goal? To starve the fire and close the crater once and for all. But there's more to the rush than just safety concerns. Turkmenistan has been under quiet but growing pressure from international climate groups to reduce its methane emissions. And with satellite technology now exposing leaks from space, the government knows the world is watching. Ending the crater's fire would give them a visible win, something dramatic they can point to at climate summits. It's the kind of move that photographs well but comes with invisible trade-offs, because behind that flickering flame is a far bigger methane problem they can't easily frame or control. At first glance, it sounds like a win for the environment. Less fire means fewer carbon emissions, right? Well, not exactly. Here's where it gets tricky. As I said earlier, the Darvaza crater burns methane, a greenhouse gas that is more than 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide over 20 years. By burning it, the site has been turning that methane into carbon dioxide, which is still harmful but less aggressive. So ironically, as dramatic as the fire looks, it's actually been doing us a weird kind of favor. It's burning off something far worse. Now, if that methane starts escaping without being burned, it goes straight into the atmosphere in its raw, most dangerous form. And we're not talking about a few leaking fumes here. According to the Coda Story investigation, Turkmenistan is already one of the top 5 methane emitters on Earth, largely due to leaky pipelines and poor regulation. For all its drama, the crater is just a visible part of a much larger, invisible crisis. So, when officials say they want to shut the gates of hell, experts like geologist Giuseppe Etiopi urge caution. He compared it to opening Pandora's box. If the fire is the lid, what happens when we take that lid off without knowing what's still brewing underneath? Here's the other concern: geological stability. This isn't just a hole with a campfire at the bottom. It's a fragile sinkhole formed when an underground gas pocket collapsed. For over 50 years, it's been venting gas upward through natural fractures in the earth. If you cap the fire without relieving the pressure, you risk sending that gas elsewhere. Maybe it seeps into nearby soil. Maybe it finds a new vent and ignites there. Or maybe, in the worst-case scenario, pressure builds until something explodes. Geologists aren't being dramatic when they say this could destabilize the whole area. Closing the crater too quickly, especially without understanding how the gas network underneath it behaves, could lead to new collapses. Since the original drilling accident in 1971 was never officially documented, scientists have been working with incomplete data. No one knows exactly how deep the crater goes, how wide the methane reservoir is, or how many fractures branch out from the original collapse. So now we're looking at a bizarre paradox. Keep the fire burning, and we continue to release carbon dioxide. But at least it's visible, somewhat controlled, and arguably the lesser evil. Extinguish it, and we might unleash something far worse. As one DW report put it, this isn't a cleanup, rather, it's a gamble. Turkmenistan's president, Serdar Berdimuhamedov, has pledged to close the crater as part of a broader environmental push. And while that sounds progressive on paper, many researchers suspect the move is more political than ecological. Shutting down the gates of hell would score points on the global climate stage, but without a clear scientific strategy behind it, the decision could backfire. It's not just about optics. It's also about chemistry, geology, and pressure systems that have been silently shifting for over 5 decades. Think of it like diffusing a bomb without knowing how it was built. You can cut the wires, but if you don't understand where the charge is, you're just guessing. In this case, the wires are gas pathways buried deep in the earth, and the charge is decades worth of pressurized methane. And then there's the human angle. Local scientists, like those interviewed by Coda Story, have warned repeatedly that political pressure may be rushing the process. Turkmengas is drilling quickly and trying to intercept methane at the source, but without adequate sensors or modeling tech. It's unclear how successful those efforts have been. One mistake, one miscalculation, and the crater might not close. It could migrate. So, what do you think? Is this a bold environmental step forward, finally putting out a fire that should have been extinguished 50 years ago? Or is it the kind of move that looks good on headlines, but risks unlocking something we're not prepared to deal with? Because this isn't just a story about the fire, it's about control. It's about whether human systems can manage forces buried beneath the earth, forces we still don't fully understand. And the sad part is that the moment we lose that control, the gates of hell won't just be a name from the past. They might become a warning for the future. But this story goes beyond science. It's about human ambition, politics, and the desert's silent secrets. Human hubris and the unseen domino effect. It all started with a misstep, one rushed Soviet drilling mission in the early 1970s that accidentally punched through a methane-rich cavern in the Karakum Desert. The result? A fiery wound in the earth that's been burning ever since. But what began as an engineering accident has become a stage for something much bigger, a high-stakes geopolitical and environmental dilemma. Turkmenistan sits atop some of the largest natural gas reserves in the world, and experts estimate the country has already lost around $50 billion in gas through that one crater alone. For a nation with few other major exports and limited global influence, that's a painful leak, one that the government has tried to stop more than once. Former President Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov made headlines in the early 2000s by pledging to extinguish the crater, but nothing came of it. His son, Serdar Berdimuhamedov, is now reviving that mission, presenting it as a bold move toward climate responsibility and economic progress. But the crater isn't just an open wound, it's also a strange magnet for global attention. Tourists flock to it, influencers film near the edge, and satellite images track its night glow from space. It's a marvel and a menace all at once, and shutting it down might seem like the logical next step, until you realize how little we understand about what closing it could unleash. Because beneath the fire is a volatile system. Experts like geologist Giuseppe Etiopi warn that ending the burn could let raw methane escape into the air, worsening global warming. Others worry that capping the crater could destabilize pressure zones underground, triggering collapses, fractures, or even new vents elsewhere. This isn't just plugging a leak, it's poking a sleeping beast with a very long fuse. What dangers lie hidden as the gates of hell flicker out, and why do scientists fear the worst is yet to come? The truth is, we don't fully know. By extinguishing the flame, we might be stopping one problem while unknowingly starting another. The science is incomplete, the politics are urgent, and the ground beneath our feet is quite literally unstable. It's a reminder that human hubris, whether Soviet or modern, has a habit of lighting fires it can't always control. What began as a drilling mishap in the early 1970s has become one of the planet's most haunting symbols. A Soviet-made inferno that's burned for more than 50 years, fueled by the Earth itself, is slowly haunting us. And now, as Turkmenistan moves to finally extinguish the gates of hell, the story is shifting once again. Scientists warn that closing the crater might not end the danger. It could trigger new ones. Methane leaks, unstable ground, political posturing, all part of a complex game that no one's fully in control of. This isn't just a fire in the desert, it's a clash between human ambition and nature's raw, unpredictable force. The gates of hell may be closing, but the real fire, the fight between human ambition and nature's power, is far from over. If this story lit a spark in your mind, tell us what you think. Should we let it burn or risk sealing the unknown?